Good.
Johnny!
All right, we're up.
Gotta get some speakers.
Pretty scared. We're live. Got that little upgrade thing.
This one. 60
Yeah.
watts. Oh, really clear. That's right.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to our Google Hangout for our Nonviolence 365 ambassadors in Ferguson, St. Louis area. We're so grateful for you all joining us tonight. How's everyone doing this evening?
Everyone, we're fine.
We have joining us in the Google Hangout, not in this space, Charles Rashaw and Kim Johnson, who are joining us on the screen now. And in this room, just as a reminder, we know you remember and just quickly say our name so that you all can see who's joining us tonight. Our CEO, Bernice A. King, is on her way to the meeting. But in this space tonight, we have folks who facilitate first through fourth. We're just going to quickly say our names again so we can get reacquainted. We'll start here.
Okay. Hi, Barbara Harrison with the King Center.
Charles Alford, Samantha. Jamal Clark with the King Center.
Vanetta West.
Rolundus Rice.
Southern Woody Bolton.
Brian Murray.
Excellent. And just in addition to us, we want to find out who's there in Ferguson. So if you all can just quickly call out your name so we can see who's in Ferguson.
Tracy Berry McGee.
Dan Cross.
Tom Schweitzer.
W. Phelps.
Thank you so much. And again, welcome. We continue to be excited about the work and the training that we completed there with the group in Ferguson, and continue to share with people what a powerful experience it was. And just tonight, as a follow-up, as we promised, we're doing a Google Hangout just to check in with you all and see how the training is being applied in your lives, in the workplace, in your relationships, and also look ahead and check out what organizations are focusing on nonviolent responses in the Ferguson, St. Louis area, and just revisit the pilgrimage to nonviolence as a way of evaluation and looking at how we apply nonviolence 365 in our lives every day. So with that being said, I think we just want to do a quick check-in, just as a feel for where we are. If you all could just share one word that you think describes your assessment of what's going on in your lives and in Ferguson right now. Just the Ferguson group there so that we can get that one word to see where you believe Ferguson is and where you are personally.
Developing.
Developing. Thank you, Tom.
Stress.
Stress. Thank you, sir. Nice.
Hopeful. Integrating.
Integrate.
Information.
Information. Wonderful. Everyone in this room, just so we can share, let's do the same. Kind of check in. Where we are. We just get news of things that's happening. So if you could just share in this space. Just one word assessment. Where we are, our thoughts about Ferguson, our personal thoughts about.
My one word would be optimistic.
All hear us there, fine?
Say that again, please.
My one word would be optimistic.
And there's the, gotcha. We had another person to come in.
Excellent. Hello, other person.
Dr. Mary Edwards Spears, how you guys doing?
Great.
Great to see you all.
My word would be hopeful as well.
My word would be commitment.
My word would be reflection.
And since a couple have already took hopeful, then I would just say anticipating.
Yeah.
My word would be prayerful.
My word would be anxious. Very anxious. My word would be reflective.
Kim Johnson.
I would say my word would be hope.
Thank you, Charles.
My word would be peace.
I think he said, judging by his expression, his word would be happy. We're going to go into now just a look back at the pilgrimage to nonviolence by way of sharing and conversation with you. We want you to share with us in this discussion about how nonviolence and pilgrimage in particular is impacting your life. So we're going to hear now from Brian, Reverend Bolden, Barbara, and Mr. Alton regarding the pilgrimage. They're going to share with us about points that are important in personal transformation: courage, internal violence, and reconciliation. So please, as you listen, think about comments or questions you may have, because this is a very interactive time. We want to hear your thoughts and your assessment.
So hello, I remember each one of you all, and it's good to see you again. This is Brian. Probably if you all remember, it's one of the first principles of Martin Luther King, and kind of how, what kind of guided his life in the movement and outside the movement was this concept of courage. And nonviolence is a way of life of courageous people. And for me, I'm making a journey through marriage. And one thing I've learned about marriage is that it takes a lot of courage to understand what I bring to the table, good and bad. And a lot of that is also bad too, because I'm used to being single and moving forward. And so if my wife points out certain things about me, I have to be very open and courageous in addressing it. And because I kind of have a survival spirit, that can place me in a point of separation from her. If I don't feel like she's on my side and things like that. And even when I was administrator with a teacher, as administrator, it's always great to have teachers that love you and that's on your side and that's loyal to you. But that's not always the case. You also inherit teachers that have loyalties other places. And so one teacher that I was working with, we didn't get along as much. And I talked to my mentor, and he just kind of stated to me, well, why don't you just go in and listen to it? I said, well, I don't want to be placed in the room by myself with it, right? And he's like, nope, not going to get in trouble, just go in and listen. And what I didn't realize was that when I was appointed administrator, the last two principals had also been men as well. And my supervisor kept on putting men in a position over her. And so I had to listen to and understand where she was coming from and realize there was some injustice going on. And so I had to understand that it wasn't personal. And so, but because my survival spirit, my spirit wanted to say, move her out of my school. But she was a great teacher. And so a lot of times when you are being courageous in a movement and things are going on and things are difficult, you have to start with yourself and look, what do I bring to the table that is helping, but that's also hurting the circumstance. So just kind of get it started. One, I hope all of you all are thinking about all the great stuff, but also as a result of being part of this experience, start thinking about, what are some things that keeps me from connecting to other people. what are some real challenges that I keep, with my mother, my father, my daughters, my sons, my friends and families? What's the consistent thing that they say over and over again that kind of puts you separate from them? But think also about all the great things, because I love each and every one of you all. So with that, in this whole experience, I have a couple of mentors I've kind of taken over, and so they can kind of check me a little bit. And one of those persons is, of course, you all met Reverend Bolden. Well, Reverend Bolden, he doesn't know this, but while I was in Ferguson, when we have breakfast, I always listen to him guide me, because not always I didn't have the answers of how to even proceed with the rest of the day. And he didn't know he was doing it, but he would check me in certain circumstances about to be more open and listening. And I remember even one breakfast, not to even steal his thunder, but it was something that I was having. It was a concept that maybe I didn't truly understand. And I don't know if he did this on purpose, but he challenged me in a way to kind of move forward that on my own I wouldn't have. And so I'm turning over to Mr. Reverend Bolden, and he's going to talk to you more about courage.
Thank you, Brian. And good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
I want to just take the few minutes that I have to talk about personal transformation as it relates to nonviolence. Because when I started out with Dr. King in 1961, I was not committed to nonviolence. I was an ex-Marine, and I felt like anybody who had the nerve to spit in my face needed to have his or her lips rearranged, if you will, if they had that much nerve. And being an ex-Marine certainly didn't help much at that time. But then when I got involved with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and Dr. King, and read the book written by the Indian leader Mahatma Gandhi, I began and go to a lot of training. I went through extensive nonviolent training before they turned me loose to travel around the country organized. And that helped. That helped a tremendous amount. And I developed not only nonviolence as a technique, but as a way of life. And it was not easy. When we talk about courage, I had courage being an ex-Marine, certainly. But there were times, and people asked me, were you ever afraid? And my answer to them is yes. Every time I went out on a march, I was afraid, because you never knew what was going to happen. And the only thing you could control is really yourself. You could work with the other folk in the march, but you had to really be in control of yourself. And hopefully that would sort of spread out through the march. And someone asked me, do you remember a specific time when you were more afraid than others? And I said, yes, in 1965 in Marion, Alabama, the night Jimmy Lee Jackson was killed. Dr. King was supposed to go over to speak, and he developed laryngitis and couldn't go, and he sent 5 of us over there to conduct a mass rally. We conducted a mass rally, and I came up with the bright idea that since we were there and the people were really looking for Dr. King, we needed to do something with them that would at least let them know that Dr. King's philosophy and that his commitment to that community, Marion, Alabama, was still there. So I said, look, let's march the folk around the courthouse and have a word of prayer, march back to the church, and let the people go home. And of course, when we went out of the church, that was the night that the sheriff and his posse and the Ku Klux Klan jumped on us and began to beat us up. And Jimmy Lee Jackson was killed trying to protect his mother, not from a Klan, but from a police officer beating her up, one of the sheriffs. And the sheriff had his deputy to bring me over to him and ask, where's that Martin Luther King? And I said, I don't know a Martin Luther, I know a Dr. Martin Luther King. I said, where's that Martin Luther King? And I said, I don't know a Martin. I wouldn't repeat what he said. I said, but I do know a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And by that time, he took his pistol and stuck it in my mouth and cocked the trigger back and said, if you breathe, I'll blow your so-and-so brains out. And I'm often asked, was I afraid? No, I wasn't afraid. I was scared because I thought it was all over. And he finally snatched the muzzle of his gun out of my mouth, cracked my 2 teeth, hit me in the head, busted my head open. They took me over to the jail, and when I got over to the jail, they were taking me upstairs, and I saw all this blood on the floor and on the steps. And when I got up there, it was James Arms, one of our comrades who worked with us, who has made that transition. But he had already been beaten and thrown in jail. But, you know, I think my nonviolent training and Elder Bernice King used certainly the right word earlier, prayer, and the ability to muster courage even when you are afraid. And there have been many times when I thought about the comment Dr. King made once, and he said, if a man hasn't found nothing worth dying for, he's not fit to live. And I was prepared to use nonviolence, even if it meant losing my life. So it was I think, an excellent transformation of my life. And I use even nonviolence today in my home. I've used it on my job. I use it with my friends. Any and everywhere I get an opportunity to talk about nonviolence and the power of nonviolence. People think, you know, somebody, you have to hit them back. But it takes much more courage to turn the cheek and let someone slap you on the other cheek than it does for you to ball your fist up and strike them back. And I'll stop right there.
Let's, Reverend Bolden mentioned transformation, and before we go to Barbara, let's just consider that word for a moment, because I just pulled it up to look at it, and one of the words that's used in defining transformation is metamorphosis. And as we know, when we're going through, or when anything's going through a metamorphosis, it doesn't always look good or feel good. So just to check in with the group there in Ferguson, would you all share with us, and then we'll share as well, since the Nonviolence 365 experience that we had there in early October, has there been like a metamorphosis or a transformation, anything that you've experienced that it didn't feel good or look good, but in order to get to living Nonviolence 365, you know you had to go through that?
This is a question I wanted to ask, and now is as good a time as any. I am challenged by the concept or developing my ability for unconditional love, and looking for some guidance. You know, in the training, it was something I knew. It's a term I know, and you think you understand, but in nonviolent training, and Brian in my 40-year marriage, and just some discussion I was in, because I reacted harshly to someone, and I thought, well, that's, you know, I'm not there, and I'm looking for ways to explore, or ways to increase my capacity for that.
Well, that's an excellent question. It takes time, because that was difficult for me. The second one was accept self and the two principles. I went through the philosophy when I was commander of homicide, and I had to look at people who had done hideous things to children, raped and cut their heads off and stuff was in them. trash baskets on Christmas Day. So I saw a lot of people act out of character. And I had to look at them and say that I disregard and will never condone what you're doing, but I still love you. And so it takes a lot of discipline. You're not going to do it overnight. It takes you to recognize, it takes you to fail. Because as we fail, we learn more from our failures than we do our successes. So I would suggest that you look at people, especially starting in your home, your family, and begin to ask yourself, why can't I love unconditionally? And make sure you begin to answer the questions of why you can't love that person. And then try to say it to the person that you really don't like, find something about them that you can start liking. And look at them as human beings, because we're all from the same source. And as Dr. King said, that when you hurt, I hurt. I can't be what I am until you are what you are. So it takes time, and you're not going to get it in a training class. So I have to try and experience it. It took me years to really get to it. And now you can't make me hate you. There's nothing you can do that makes you hate me. I control my emotions, and I can't afford the causes and the results of hate. So it's a personal thing, and don't think that you change. You have to struggle through it. So don't give up on it, but keep trying and don't be afraid to fail.
Thank you so much.
I'll go next. I think for me, the issue that I'm dealing with is the fact that I go into a lot of different schools and do support groups with the kids in the community, constantly talking about having faith in our community, and the kids are in fear because a lot of our buildings are now boarded up, and the news keeps talking about the what ifs, and the kids are just, they got it on Facebook, they got it on Twitter, they're streaming. Everything is happening in school where a lot of kids are told not to discuss anything. And so our churches, our communities are saying have faith and not be afraid. And we teach our kids, to have that faith walk, but yet you have adults that are living in fear and running to the grocery store, and nobody's coming out because everybody's on edge and dealing with anxiety. So how do you communicate faith to the kids and not to live in fear? They're canceling school parties, dances, and games, and the kids are just in fear, and that's difficult for me when I'm used to pushing them to walk in faith and not live in fear.
I want to ask a question because I certainly don't have an answer. Good evening to everybody. I want to know, what is it that people have fear of? Because oftentimes when we talk about fear, it's an abstract. It's the unknown, and I think sometimes when we can put a specific face or a specific situation to it, it makes it a little bit more manageable. Let me give you just an example, and perhaps for some people it's not a good example, but it has certainly helped me in my life. I often challenge people who carry guns. I ask them the question, what is it that you are fearing, or what is it that you're protecting? And as you know, if you push a person, at the end of the day, most people who have weapons, at the end of the day, I think they're trying to protect their life, and which taps into, I guess, a fear, perhaps, of death, or fear of pain, maybe. I don't know. But at the end of the day, the very thing that they're trying to protect, number one, and you have to kind of explore this with people, is that death is inevitable for everybody on the earth. None of us know at which time we're going to leave this earth, and we certainly don't know which way we're going to leave the earth. And as much as we try to protect ourselves, when that time comes, there's nothing that can protect us. And I'll give you a good example. My father was down in Mississippi once, and they stopped at a gas station, and he had the window down, and his arm was out of the window. And the gentleman, I guess, who owned the station came and basically said, "You that nigga King, I'll kill you." And so, of course, my father looked at him and responded with something like, "God bless you, sir," or something along those lines. Of course, he didn't get killed at that particular time. But members of my father's staff said, "Doc, you know, you need to keep the window up and be careful." I mean, and my dad basically said to them, "Look, President Kennedy had the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, the Secret Service, the FBI, the CIA, and they still got it." The point being that I think when you conquer whatever that is you are fearing, when you face it, you're better able to deal with it. But if you don't know what you have a fear of, then it becomes the very thing what fear means is, what is that thing? False evidence appearing to be real.
Yeah.
And so my question is, as you're working with the kids, because I think on the one hand, I think it's important that we protect the innocence of childhood.
Yes.
On the other hand, we have to balance it at certain ages because at some point kids have to grow and develop to a place of being able to experience some kind of pain, the results from that, good, bad, ugly, indifferent, so that they can manage it in life. But I think it's important that we explore that. What is the fear?
I asked them what were they fearing the most, to try to help them with that. And so, because like letters have come out in the communities about make sure you get water, make sure that they fear that they won't be able to have groceries, food to eat. They fear people are going to come into their homes. They're afraid that they keep hearing the helicopters. They're afraid because their families are afraid. You know what I'm saying? They're afraid they won't be able to go to school again because they keep telling them about, they'll make an announcement of when you can cancel school. So I guess their fears, they're legitimate fears, but they're afraid because they don't have facts. And their parents haven't been taught to, their parents are feeding into the media. And
right.
Yeah.
So here's the question. One, and those are legitimate fears. At some point, they have to be translated into concerns as opposed to fears. But here's the question as you explore this with them. One, we have to show them that this that they're experiencing is not foreign. That there have been, this is where history comes into place. There have been time periods of humanity, and they are part of humanity. We got to connect them to the whole of humanity. I think sometimes we have failed to help our kids understand that they're not the first generation that has faced hardships and challenges. And trying to help them to see that here we are some years later, and while, yes, it may be true that for some people this could happen, but it is no guarantee that for everybody it's going to happen, because this is a time period when this happened, and this was the result, and this is where these people ended up, and this is how this happened, and people were okay and they made it.
Yeah.
And I think we have to connect some of those dots and be really real with them, because, again, one of the hardest conversations to have with a young person is about death. I mean, we know that. And death doesn't always mean physical. It could mean, something, the absence of a loss of something, the separation from something can feel like a death. The separation from my food, my family can be a form of a death. But we have to bring in some of those pieces as we are helping them work through it to build, quote unquote, their faith. Because again, this is a very unfortunate situation. Not the first time in humanity that we have been faced with something like this. And when I say humanity, I mean not just America, I mean all over the place.
You know, if I just add something, I remember about 3 decades ago, right here in Atlanta, we had a crisis situation with murdered and missing children. And our children were scared to death.
Yeah.
They were scared to go to school, they were scared to go outside. And what we did with Senator Arthur Langford, who was the head of the United Youth Adult Conference, and I worked with him, we traveled all over the city with churches and fraternities and sororities, every little group we could get to instill in the parents that they are the ones who have to show courage.
Yes.
If they're going to be afraid, that's the kids are going to be afraid.
Right.
My daughter, who was almost 40 now, was about 7 or 8 at the time. But I never stopped her. If she wanted to go to the movie, I would take her, drop her off to the movie, and I would go back to work. And I would take her. And I would go back to the movie to pick her up. And at that time, just about every week, there was a girl or a young boy being found murdered. I mean, this entire city was hysterical. But once the parents got involved and started working with the young people and began to show no fear, then the kids developed that transformation. And I think that's more likely what needs to happen in Ferguson. You ought not be afraid to go to the store. If you want to go to the store, you ought to get out and go to the store. And you ought to take your kids with you to the store so they can see you doing this. And I think once we can get that kind of movement going on with the adults in Ferguson, and they can't be afraid to talk about it. I heard you say they don't want to talk about it. You got to talk about it because it's there. And until you decide to sit down and start communicating, and you will find that once you start talking to them and explaining to them what's going on, the community will be better off.
Is there anyone else there in St. Louis that wants to share?
I have a question. But if you, in terms of reconciliation, if you want to reconcile but one party doesn't want to, do you have any tips on how you could encourage or urge the other person to want to reconcile?
Actually, in response to that question, let's move along through this pilgrimage and go, if we can, go to reconciliation and then come back to internal violence.
Yeah, reconciliation and resolution. It takes 2 people to reconcile. And sometimes when we're doing domestic violence, one party doesn't want to reconcile. So let's look for a third party, somebody that can trust, that can come into the equation. So a lot of times what we say is keep the door open. Don't close the door on people, but look for who could bring that person into a conversation. But reconciliation takes not only a handshake action between the 2 people who have had conflict. That's the challenge in Ferguson, is that, and that's the characteristics of Kenyan Nonviolence 365, because it gives you space for reconciliation. And once you have your goal, your needs and your goal same order, reflecting your needs, reflecting your goal, it opens up for reconciliation. Therefore, in Ferguson, we're very concerned that these groups who are very opinionated, very verbally violent, and have done things to the power structure, like go on television and actually curse out the governor. That's hard to negotiate and reconcile. So it's a method, a characteristic of change that what brings about the reconciliation. But in short, if you can't reconcile, look for a third party, somebody that they respect that can bring in. Never stop, you never give up. Reconciliation is not always appropriate to two people, but your position, you never give up, keep trying. About 365 is creative, so be afraid to be creative as you begin to try to pull people in for that reconciliation.
Continuing to move in the conversation about the pilgrimage to nonviolence, we're going to have Ms. Barbara share about internal violence.
Okay, so when we were there, we talked about, we read the pilgrimage, and one of the things that we talked about was this whole thing of the spirit or internal violence. And for some people, that may be initially a difficult concept. I know we talked about a lot of times the physical problem people get. And so when we talk about the personal transformation, I'll just share a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to address a couple of things so we can even have examples tonight where we talk about internal violence. Internal violence has to do with several different things. You can look at it from the emotional standpoint, the psychological standpoint in terms of the violence, but also verbal. Many times people understand that part, or they don't understand. So it can be what you say, but it can also be what you should say, but you did not say. So that could be a form of internal violence. So for me, I know just recently, even in my family, we had an incident where, for me, when I had a chance to kind of reflect on it, it was a form of violence. It was a form of internal violence because there were situations and things that occurred where there should have been things said that weren't said. And so what you end up doing is creating a situation or atmosphere where there's violence. It could have been something that could have been dealt with, but it wasn't. And then the other same, and within the same tone of that, in that same conversation, it was looking at myself and examining what I had said and how I had said it. Because even that, too, was a form of violence. When I started to think back on it, it's like I could have probably said that a different way. Because for the person that was receiving that probably wounded them emotionally. It wounded their spirit. It may have shut them down. And as I thought about it, it made them feel like their particular opinion or thought that something was wrong with that, or that it wasn't even valid for them to have it. So those are ways that we do that a lot of times. And when I think Reverend Bowden, you mentioned, if you heard someone mention tonight, and they were saying the kids are being told, don't talk about it. Well, that creates violence in a person's spirit. That's emotional. It can even create psychological violence. You're talking about an expression and having something that's being bottled up and it's not being acknowledged. Those are all forms. Now, many times people don't see those kinds of things as violence because it's not something as tangible as the incident where someone hits you or shoots you or stabs you. But in terms of what the damage that it does and that it's doing to those young people, it probably feels like a shot or a stab because it can be a deep wound. So when we talk about the internal violence, those are the kinds of things. And even when we look at how we in coalitions, and I'm sure you there, just like here, on the job, I have opportunities all the time. We have several meetings. It's how do I relate to other people in those meetings? And then to reflect on that, I was in a meeting today. Okay, reflect on, okay, what was my part or what was going on in that room in terms of what should have been said or how it was said, and then once it was time for me to express myself, how did I go about that? And was I concerned or even cognizant of what that was doing to the other people that were receiving those words that were coming out of my mouth, or the tone that it was getting? So a lot of times, even with, you all have been building coalitions, you've been coming together, many of you, with groups and individuals that you haven't had to come with on a very stressful situation. So I'm sure there's been opportunities, and I would love to hear some of this, about how you felt about how certain things were dealt with, or how they're not being dealt with, or how you're interacting or how you perceive or receive something. And on the flip end, can you think about instances where you may have inflicted those same types of things? So when we talk about internal violence, I want you to think about it from a psychological point of view. What's being impacted on the other person, not just you, but how what you're doing, how you're doing it, your tone. What does that do to the others that you're interacting with? And that could be family, it could be coworkers, it could be groups that you're working with now to try to come to some type of resolution, well, not even reconciliation yet, but to come to some kind of idea and agreement about what are some of the next steps, what you should be doing and how you should move forward. So when we talk about that particular thing, I want you to kind of think about, because this is, when you say nonviolence 365, this is all day, every day. Because we are constantly interacting with people. It may be a little more difficult sometimes for people to measure and say, well, I can go through all day without hitting somebody, or kicking somebody, or stabbing somebody, or shooting somebody. But it's a constant walk with nonviolence 365 with that time. And a lot of times with your emotions and how you conduct yourself, even your expressions sometimes can be a violent kind of thing. So we talk about internal violence. We're speaking about all those kinds of things.
Y'all have any questions or comments about what Barbara just shared?
I've got, this is Dan Cross. I did as you were suggesting, as you all were talking, I made a list of things that I was thinking about, and I got a list of about 12 items. I guess, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I guess I'm observing, and I don't know how to best express this, but let's say you have a family, and on the one hand, there's an expectation that that each person in the family is expected to be the change they want to see, to take responsibility for their own lives, to be brought up as being able to see past what is being done to them, and instead being able to have a good character, good attitude, such that they'll have good behavior. On the other hand, you might be in a dysfunctional family, and so you have competing issues where the dysfunctional family is actually having a negative impact on the child, and the child is expected to grow up to be better than the example of the family. And so I'm saying that because after attending a lot of meetings where I've put myself into places where I've typically never been, gone to many of the activities that have been set up by the African American community for educational purposes and so forth. I'm beginning to see that the diversity within that community is about the same as the diversity within the white community. And there is dysfunctionality within families within the black community, just like there's dysfunctionality within the white community families, and that there are kids that have never been taught how to grow up believing in themselves, both in the black community and in the white community. And I'm struggling how to have that kind of a dialogue with people outside of my sphere of influence. I've taken all of this, my observations that I've had, and I've gone to people in my church to share what I've learned. I've gone to my family and my extended family to share what I've learned. But once I go beyond that, I'm finding that there is just this kind of stiffness, this opposition to believe that there is any other reality than the reality that they already were exposed to. And that is an anxiety for me, because I am seeing that it's creating with the, I'm rambling, and stop me when you believe I've said an adequate amount for you to understand. But there's a sense that I'm picking up, at least in the community that I'm more exposed to, which is the white community, and I typically listen to white radio stations, that the protests are actually becoming counterproductive, because the steps 1 through 4 never occurred. And we are now on the verge of this announcement, and there is this fear that I have that the wonderful opportunity that might have existed during the last 3 months for the Caucasian population to perceive that they have a vested interest in some of the same things that the African American community is strongly talking about. We're going to miss those because we have focused on one event, and that's Michael Brown. And when Michael Brown's that event is past, we will forget that, or we will actually have a counterproductive event that will say to all of us that once again the system doesn't work, and we will not realize that we have commonality in terms of experiences with governmental abuse, whether it is from, whether one person's abuse has been experienced through the IRS, another through the police department, another through the zoning department, another through whatever. There's a commonality, and I was struck with, I attended something that was identified, titled as Father to Father. And the last speaker was Captain Ron Johnson. And he said something that for many years I have agreed with, and I'm rambling, so I'm covering a number of topics, but this is what he said. And it was contrary to everyone else who had spoke before him. He was the last speaker, the last father talking about what it's like to be a African American father and to bring up kids in today's world. And he said, racism does not exist. It's entirely a matter of understanding. And to me, I can truly relate to that. Because that, to me, says that humanity comes before color. And this whole, you talk about transformation and pilgrimage. So for the last 3 months, I've been embarking upon this to try to discover, you know, what it is that I need to change about myself. And these are some of the things that I'm uncovering during this journey. And I'm wondering, because I so much respected what I learned during those 4 days, and some of the points of view I think I grasped from you all. I'd like to hear some kind of feedback to my feedback, like we kind of agree that you're seeing those things, or you're not. You know, you're not seeing them right. Here's some additional information to help you get a better understanding on things. I should be quiet at this point.
You said a whole lot, and we don't have time to read them, but I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. Do you understand why the protesters are angry and turning to violence? Do you have an understanding of why?
I understand why they're angry.
And would you explain that? Why are they angry and protesting? Why, in your opinion?
Would you say that again so I could hear it again?
In your opinion, why are they angry, the people that are protesting? Why would African Americans be angry? Your opinion.
I see the primary reason is because there is a belief that the track record of how police shootings of African Americans has always gone against the person shot and for the person who did the shootings.
In Nonviolence 365, you have to shut down and be able to articulate your opponent's position just as well as they can yours and understand how they arrive. One of the examples was Dr. King's in Birmingham jail. So the first thing that I would suggest that has to happen is that you shut down your opinion and begin to look and see if you can understand, not agree with, but understand the people who are out there protesting and very angry and very violent, verbal. That's the first step, is to understand their position and see how your position fits, how much of that fits in with your position. If we can go out with and talk about this, but Hegel, I gave an analysis. Dr. King always looked at problems through Hegel's analysis, what theses and the antithesis. And he said the truths are not on either side of the extremes are in the middle. So if you can pull the truths from your position and the truths from the protester's position, threads of truths, you have a higher truths called the synthesis. I would suggest that when I was dealing with other people, especially across racial lines, that you try to understand. Dr. King was much more interested in what the Ku Klux Klan had to say than his church people. So I would shut down your opinion and begin to see if you can understand why African Americans are angry and why they're out there. I agree with you that may be one reason about the police, but I think there's other things that are happening in the African American community that causes some people in this country to be very angry and take the position that they're taking. What that does is begin to have a little more sensitivity as you begin to search for your entrance. And as I suggested, you have to be very careful of how you intervene, when you intervene, who intervenes, and what you say when you intervene, because some of your intervention create barriers because of your the timing is wrong, and you said things that were not sensitive. I don't know if you misunderstood Captain Brian Johnson about racism. I'll have to accept what you said. I know Captain Johnson, and I'm not sure that's what he meant when he said it, because he's been through a lot. He's going through a lot now. So I'll just reserve my opinion. I suggest that you try to understand why they're angry. I agree with them, just understand and go a little bit further than just the police, their existence of police officers.
Well, thank you. I did go after this, after the presentation by the panelists, I went up to Captain Johnson and I specifically asked him if what I had heard is what I had heard. And he said yes. And I said, well, how do you do that? How do you help other people understand that? And he said, you just keep working at it. Now, I'm not trying to, put him on the spot. I'm just saying that, I'm going to these places to try to hear and understand what the issues are. And, there's quite a diversity out there, and when I hear that diversity, I also try to match it up with, my upbringing to try to understand where my upbringing maybe is faulty and where it might be valid. Hearing your response gives me some concern that, I can't even hear, and then when I go to kind of double check it, I got the same piece of information, so I'm a little concerned that.
Well, I can just tell you, you've only been exposed to this for about a month. I would not give up on it, but I would keep the faith and look at all your alternatives and give it a chance to work and let it work for you, let it work in your heart. And then your goal, in your pursuing this, what is your goal? And begin to look at opportunities and continue to read. That's why we have Google, because it's not a quick fix. You just can't walk out the room and say, oh, I have this. It's going to take some time, but don't give up on it. Nonviolent practitioners have deep faith in the future. So we know that the future is safe because of the faith that we have in each other and humanity. So my recommendations to you, keep pulling away, keep talking to yourself, and don't give up.
Thank you.
And another thing I just want to comment on, because as I was listening to you, what I heard from what you said is that there is a desire to figure out how we can bridge the divide that exists between the two communities, and that's a real issue in America because everybody is looking at it through their own sift, their own personal experience. And I want to commend you for having the courage to want to look at that, because there are a lot of people in your shoes, of your hue, of your cultural experience that would not even dare venture out into that area. So, as Charles Alfred just said, continue on that pursuit, and as you continue, it's important that you pursue it almost like a child, like a curious child. Children oftentimes come to situations
without, basically with a lot of questions and curiosity. They don't have answers yet, and that gives them the opportunity to continue to hear the deeper issues that are happening. But hold on to what what I sense is a sincere heart to want to be a vessel to help bridge a terrible divide that has been in our country and lingered for so long, and that people refuse to really sit down and come face to face with and deal with the difficult issues as it relates to it. You know, I think you are correct in your assessment that, from this perspective, that the system, whatever we call this system, the system has faces to it. A lot of times it's harder to tackle it because it's intangible when we put it in system and institutional forms, and we allow individuals to get away when we do that. But this quote-unquote system is, the goal is to divide and conquer, is to further create more divisiveness and distraction and trouble. And you know, I think that if we can find a way to not fall into the hands of that system, then we, the people, can help to really move the nation forward. And so, you know, one of the things that I wish I had a megaphone where I could just blast out all the way across the country, and particularly what I call right now the epicenter of all of this, which is where you all are, that we all have to think about the moment that we are in. And I think that's what you're saying. This is a moment. This is a potential moment that if we don't manage it right, we may have missed something very powerful that could be so transformative to move our nation in the right direction, that we are allowing too much of our own personal issues, our own prejudices, our own pains, and our own emotions to get in the way. And when we do that, we kind of fall into the hands of this system, so to speak. And that system wins, and the people lose, so to speak. And so this is really a time that people need to understand that a strategy not to fall into the hands of either a system or a expected an expected act or reaction, because there are people that have clearly laid it down the line that there's going to be this action. And in fact, I was looking at, I don't know if it was, it may have been Fox News, because I look at all of it. I'm not afraid to engage all of it. And the title was "Preparing for War," and someone on there commented, well, the way in which we are wording that is wrong, because I think it was the captain of St. Louis, Captain Dodson said, well, that's a problem because we're prepared, and I'm not saying he means that, but I thought about what he said. He said, we're preparing for peace. He's basically saying that the media is feeding this frenzy. You know, preparing for war, just putting all the propaganda out there.
They are.
So we, the people, have to be stronger than the media. And we got to out-strategize the media, because their job is to do that. They're part of the whole system to divide and continue to create tension and disturbance and all of that. So I love the media. I think they play a vital role sometimes, but I think
they're not always being responsible in moments like this. This is not a moment for the media to do the usual.
Thank you.
And also, just looking at and thinking about what you just shared, there's a passage of a speech that Dr. King gave where he talks about the World House. And I just wanted to share that with you all as we think about the beloved community, the global community, that we live in a world house. And what I heard while you were talking is that that's what you're trying to cultivate, first with yourself and then with the community around you. So I just want to read this to the group. One of the great liabilities of history is that all too many people fail to remain awake through great periods of social change. Every society has its protectors of the status quo and its fraternities of the indifferent sleeping through revolutions. But today, our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. The large house in which we live demands that we transform this worldwide neighborhood into a worldwide brotherhood. Together, we must learn to live as brothers, or together we will be forced to perish as fools. So it's always important that we ask ourselves, how do I begin to see this as a world house? And how do I go through a period of transformation where I'm able to live and walk in love in that world house? So thank you for sharing. It wasn't too long, it wasn't too much. It was great. I appreciate all of your comments.
And we want to continue to encourage you all to either, you can, I think Dr. West sent you all an email about the books, my father's books. I think it's important that that you try to pick those books up, strive toward freedom of where we go from here. Chaos, because I think there's some things there that can be very helpful in these moments, in these times. It's ironic how he lived some, 50, all this stuff took place 50 and 60, it's like cycling back around to us, and the power of his timeless today that can really speak to us and give us a sense of direction in what we're seeking to do as a community across the world.
Thank you. I want to check in with Kim Johnson and Charles. Do you all have anything to share?
I'd just like to say that I think until we look at community as an opportunity for determination to meet motivation, we'll continue to spiral around in the way that we're talking about. In order to get that beloved community, you've got to be motivated enough and determined, and those two things have to meet in order to get to that place, because it won't just happen. And in other words, you've got to be determined enough to see change, but with that determination, you've got to have action with it, and that's the motivation piece. And so yes, it will be arduous, yes, it will be long, yes, it will be difficult, but if you can keep that motivation aligned with your determination, you will start to see change. And it may not be immediate, but even small pockets of change are worth the celebration. So motivation has to meet determination.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
We can't hear you,
I
Charles.
can't hear you, Charles. Are you muted on your mic?
I got the mic. You can't hear me?
Charles,
Yep.
we can't hear you.
I don't know what's going on.
We can't hear you.
I can't.
He's like, I don't know. I don't know.
You have a mic hooked up?
He got the mic like he got the.
Hello.
Oh, God. Stick it back in or something.
Or maybe unplug it.
Charles, I can hear you from my side, though.
Can you hear me now?
You can't hear him at all. Kim, what's going on? Can other people hear him?
No.
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 You just changed clothes.
No.
Can't hear. Okay, we'll keep working on that. Thank you, Charles. What you said was profound. We're going to go to now and update what's happening in St. Louis. Just in what we talked about, an update on our understanding of what's happening that you all share as well about the danger of rumors, and go into the organizations that are focusing on cultivating a nonviolent response. And your makes a threefold discussion. First, an update, and then within that, the danger of rumors. Some of the things that we're hearing, and then stations there that you all know of are cultivating a nonviolent response to the pending decision for Officer Wilson. So we're going to start with to discuss the update.
I think starting with the discussion, we'll probably start. We came, we were there just recently, I think November 7th, 8th. So we were there, and so I think Charles, you probably just want to talk because they had a mini event that we wanted to share a little bit. They only had one woman there, so it wasn't an event that I feel like she didn't. Okay, I feel like to attend. So we'll give you a little update on what we did when we were there Friday, the main event. Charles talked about that. And Saturday, we had some meetings with Urban League president and CEO, and on we had a chance Saturday. And then Sunday, we were there and were open to meet with a few, and I think I see one person to the event. We had a chance to kind of share a little bit about why we were there, what we were doing, and then we'll go to River.
Maybe move us before we start talking is to hear from you. One meeting on in St. Louis, a meeting around, but any coalition and not the coalition with other organizations, and we know you belong to a lot of organizations. Are you hearing anything about who's mobilizing for nonviolent protesting, or people that are doing things in nonviolent spirit of nonviolence? Organizations or coalition building that spots?
That's one of my challenges is identifying who's doing what in the community and becoming a part of it. There's several different. There is a, I think it's called the Michael Brown Leadership Coalition that seems to be negotiating or organizing. I think I read 42 different organizations, but I've had trouble establishing contact with them to find out what's going on and to offer help if I can. And that's been a great frustration to me. In some of the things they say, they appear to be using the nonviolent steps, but without a better understanding or direct communication, you don't know whether
that hands up, don't shoot.
Well, there's hands up, don't shoot, and then today I think it's called the Michael Brown Leadership Coalition or something along those lines.
Okay.
That's been the biggest challenge for me is getting direct communication as opposed to hearing from the person you're sitting to, next to at the coffee shop or something like that.
So, you live in Ferguson?
No, I live in Chesterfield.
You know, have you heard of Tracy Blackman?
She's a friend of mine, yeah. But we've communicated a few times, but she and Christy Griffin I communicate with, but they've both been so busy. They've done a good job. Christy's done a good job of sending information out, but like the father-to-father thing, I just heard about it the day before it was held, Dan, and it's just I feel challenged to get good communication and good information.
Is there anybody in the audience that could help out? Anybody that you in the coalition group you're working with that you can lead him to?
Well, I've learned some of what's going on by becoming friends with your son on Facebook.
Yeah, Chuck talks to everything. A stop sign. He was talking to a stop sign.
Well, I may be a stop sign, but he does post. He does post the flyers on his Facebook page for a variety of these opportunities. And I guess at one of the follow-up meetings that we were having here at the junior college, one of the women suggested attending the Hands Up Coalition meetings on Wednesdays at 10 o'clock, and so I've attended 3 or 4 of those now, and I've been very impressed with the group of people that are there and how their thought processes, their ability to work together, and actually have through an association with parish nurses, I've volunteered to for my house to be the place for some medics from Chicago to have a bed.
Oh, okay. What organization was that?
The Hands Up Coalition.
You meet on Wednesday?
Wednesdays at 10 o'clock. It's in the morning, and I can give you the address. But that's kind of a high-level group. You know, there's a whole bunch of groups that are participants in that collective, and where I'm going with that is, unless you're a specific participant in one of those subset groups, they're not going to tell you what's going on. But the 19 points that were proposed, I got to see that rolled out. I got to hear the responses that those that sat down with the heads of the police departments, what their responses were. I was very encouraged that you know, there was a movement amongst them to kind of make as much as they could any upcoming activities when the announcement occurs to be as nonviolent as possible, and that the individuals that would be that there was actually a discussion, ongoing discussion face to face between Hands Up and the police, that both wanted and were agreeing that they would identify to each other problem characters.
Yes. Now, what we don't want to do, we don't want to lose focus on why the protesters are out there, because that's kind of getting pushed back, and that's what violence does. It takes you off the issue. The issue was an officer that reacted right, or that he was in violation of the law. So what happens now, we're in more discussion about the police and the protesters when it comes down rather than the issue. So I encourage you to continue to focus on the issue that brought all the protesters to the streets, because that's kind of getting pushed down and getting lost in the conversation. The second thing I would caution, we were in St. Louis Monday, and we just heard tremendous rumors. I mean, almost every other hour, rumors came out. The airplane was dropping too along Ferguson, that
they turned the lights
out,
the electricity
in Ferguson, how it turned out. There's so many people saw rumors on Facebook. I would encourage you that when you hear those rumors, especially on Facebook, that you challenge them and see where it came from, because those rumors will start riding. And it's dangerous when you start saying those things that we saw on Facebook, and people calling Chuck and interrupting us because they heard so many rumors. I know you can't stop it, but I encourage you to verify, if you can, where those rumors are coming from, because I understand everybody's fearful, but we've got to make sure that those rumors don't get out without being verified. So that's one thing I caution you, that you always challenge those rumors to come out. We heard a lot in St. Louis. We're going to get back to you. We don't have time to talk about it now. But in closing, we talked to the Urban League president, and they have a center there in the mall that will look for job opportunities. There's also replacement, drug abuse, and GED. And we've got some people that are going to start putting those flyers out, because the people that we heard in Ferguson knew nothing about the Urban League's office. And it was about a mile or two away.
It's 2 or 3 miles right there in the neighborhood.
And we're going to put that out so people can go there. They have a 4-day plan, prepares you for a job, and they have people companies, about 8 companies, will give people jobs. So we learned a lot in St. Louis. We'll be sharing that with you, but I think we've come right out of time. But any questions? I'll turn it back to them.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yes. Hi, Charles.
Hey, everybody. I'm sorry for the technical difficulty. Yeah, guess it's these mics on my computer. If I could say something. First, Vanetta, hello. I said happy. When you couldn't hear me, I did say happy. And peace.
You must be happy.
I mean, me personally, listen to everybody, listen to what's going on, and being a product of both sides of that fence. Because sometimes I have to go on the dark side in order to look at the light side, because that's where I was at first. Playing advocate with the youth on that side that's finna face what society trying to bring up for them to face, for as like if a riot jump off, if a civil unrest jump off, if these little youngsters, like you said, living in fear, don't know what to do. The parents out there protesting, they don't know what to do. It's like the blind leading the blind. It's like everybody profiling violence, profiling what's going to take place before it takes place. It's like a premeditated. I know the repercussions, but a lot of people don't know repercussions. A lot of these people are even acting off repercussions because it haven't came yet. It might come in the fashion of violence. It might come in a fashion where the youth be the one that bring the peace, just like we did. I was told, man, y'all started riots, y'all kicked this off, man, y'all did everything, and we know we didn't do it. But when it was all said and done, the smoke cleared, it was us that brought the peace, that brought the community to clean up, that brought the community together. And we seen our mothers, our fathers, our grandmothers out there struggling to do, like you say, to go to the store to get soap and to get food, to try to get gas, to get generators. People was buying guns, all that stuff. We seen all that stuff transpire. At the same time, at the end of the day, it was us that said, listen, y'all need to go back home now. Y'all doing what we don't normally do. So that violence that's going to prevail, if it do happen, it's going to be a quick something. What happens when it clears what them kids is worried about? And see, they're not scared of the violence. They're scared of the repercussions of the violence. The repercussions is going to be, they're going to start locking them up. They're going to start, they're going to have nothing to do, nowhere to live, nowhere to go. I mean, they're boarding businesses up before it happens, so that's already letting you know something's going to happen, because they're pushing it to happen. They're making it happen. You're creating a monster, and there's no monster out there. So I think a lot of people need to stop creating that monster, because it will jump over that gate and bite you. And it's going to bite people that don't want it. So now coming from the peace part about it now, because I've transformed, I understand, but we can't be scared. As big homies, as parents, as peacemakers, as law enforcement, or whoever else it is that's trying to stop the violence, we can't be scared to approach the situation frontline, hands on the ground, because if we're sitting around just talking about it, that's all we're doing is talking about it. When there's people out there physically, just like last night, I had to physically go somewhere all the way to LA, 6-hour drive, because a brother was fearing for his life, and I knew 5 dudes that was going to take his life. I drove 6 hours down there, went up into the club, grabbed the 5 dudes, took them outside, called the dude, and had to really sit down with him. Dang, they had to fight with one of the dudes to prevent this from happening. But I stopped it from happening because I had to go down there, get in their face. Somebody had to go down there on that front line where them protesters at. Somebody go down there where them kids at in the neighborhood that's living in fear. Somebody go in these schools every day, each and every day, until something happened, until change comes. Because what they don't want is violence. So how do we stop this violence from happening right now? We got to stop talking about violence. The media's pushing it. People showing, people boarding the stores up, people showing how they buying guns. I mean, that alone right there tell me, man, I'm scared. And I'm going to go protect myself. So that's what they do. And the gangs is already living like that. They're not scared. They want to do it. They don't want to do it because of the repercussions, but they want to do it because of the build-up, the tired. You will have a build-up of people talking about too much and not doing nothing. You got more talking and less action right now. They need the action part and less talking now. Now people need to step out there and do something. We have too many blueprints going on and not enough walking, not enough action, not enough reality being set to people in stone. The false promises, man, people don't want to hear that. People tired of hearing false promises, tired of hearing what's going to be done, what can be done. Do it. Because there's people out there doing the opposite right now. There's people out there don't care about what's happening, what we talking about. They still out there doing that. They still going to be violent. They still going to their clubs every day. They're not even talking about what's going to transpire. But when it transpires, they're going to be the first ones to jump out there. The ones that ain't listening, the ones that ain't never watched a protest on TV, the one that's looking at the negative things on YouTube and the negative outlooks on Facebook, the extremists that's out there every day pitching negative and violence to them. Man, like Tracy Blackman, that's a good woman, because they said she the one coming out there giving people jackets and gloves and water because they out there cold now. It's getting cold out there. And these protesters come from places where they don't normally come from, right around the corner, as of not driving down there with big jackets, man. So somebody has to get out there and really just, straight out tell them, man, go home. You know, this violence ain't gonna get it, man. Somebody literally, I don't have the answer, all the answers, but I can tell you I have 50% of the answers, man.
Well, thank you for your 50%, Charles. Thank you. That's what was powerful in what Charles talked about is it's a reminder that nonviolence is not passive. Not the way Dr. King taught it. And some of this is going to take action. And what you all have shared with us tonight and allowed us to share with you is there has been a personal transformation, and there are things that we're all working towards, trying to, all of us. Anybody, raise your hand if you're still trying to, on your pilgrimage to nonviolence. Yes. We're all on a pilgrimage to nonviolence, and that's our language here at the King Center. And we're honored to be on this pilgrimage with you. Truly, to hear what you all have shared tonight. We're honored to be on this pilgrimage and all of us being transformed together. We thank you for joining us. We thank you for the goals you've established, one of those being to train 20,000 people in the greater St. Louis area. And we want to share with you that we're looking at that and assessing that, and as you continue to bring those goals to the table, we'll continue to look at what part, if any, we could play in that. Tracy, is your hand up?
Yeah, I was just saying that I was getting information. I don't know if everybody had this information, but I get information from the Ferguson National Response Network, and that's on Facebook also, and it just tells you events that are being prepared to happen nationally. And then I get a text message from, when you text 90975, you text them hands up, and that's like Justice for All, and they tell us about things that are happening in St. Louis for training through an organization called Organize More. And then my pastor is Tracy Blackman, and so we do the Mothers on a Mission, where we have different meetings every week, and we get the gloves and the food and the different things together to take out to the community. So they have something on Facebook also. So there's a lot of different small things that are happening through Twitter and Facebook that are legitimate. But I think that we also need to be able to put information out there about things that are not.
Well, just to share about that, Tracy, we have an email address that we set up. If you all could continue to share with us the things that you believe are legitimate and the things you don't believe are legitimate and phrase them that way so that we can all be on the same page and share with the group. So we all know the things that we're hearing that are happening in the Ferguson, St. Louis area. That would be great. You have my email address. You have the email address for the group. If you all, if you, Tracy, could email me those two names of those groups that you just mentioned so that we can begin to look at those groups as well. Thank you.
And I have a question. Are any of you all aware of any master plan related to when the indictment comes down, if there is no true deal? Has there been any groups that have formulated a master plan regarding that? I'm just curious.
I know there's some. Trying to pull up that Ferguson National Response Network. They did have several different plans in place of where people were to come together to figure out what was next. And I'll send that information to the group.
Okay, so basically, everybody's just they're still in their own little silos.
Yes.
Something to happen with no real short and long-term plan. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't know if I totally agree with that. The last Wednesday's Hands Up Coalition, I did have to leave early, but on the agenda, that I missed that part because of a doctor's appointment. The agenda items I missed were exactly that discussion. So
I'm not sure what it is.
Well, I'll find out more this Wednesday.
Okay.
Wednesday.
Is it I've heard of the Hands Up Coalition, and I think that Charles and you meet with some of them. So I guess I'm just trying to understand if there is a channel of dissemination of information to the larger body of the community. So it's just kind of so 3 months. They have figured out how to keep people divided to the point of not connecting enough to create a master plan and strategy that transcends all this.
Well, Michael McPherson with the Veterans for Peace has been very active. Have you anybody attended or heard of Michael McPherson with Veterans for Peace?
Michael Pearson is the co-chair of the Hands Up Coalition. He runs the meetings on Wednesdays along with a woman. I forget her name, but she's a lawyer.
Yeah, and they have a whole. In fact, they were doing practice today for civil disobedience. They had training on how to separate groups of people, the police. So he's doing a lot. But Michael doesn't understand nonviolence as we understand it.
That is correct.
Yeah, Michael McPherson, but that's the Veteran for Peace.
So again, we're basically in a situation where people are just kind of going to react because they haven't. There's no use.
In every meeting that I have attended, I have not yet heard a definition of nonviolence or of what violence is that matches what you taught in the 4 days.
Yes. Yes.
I heard something about they when they make the decision, they want to do it on the weekend. What I heard is that they want to, when they make the decision, or when the decision comes down, they want to do it when the kids are out of school, they're at home, and they want to do it either on a Saturday, a late Friday, or Saturday. News.
That was on the news today that they want 24 hours advance. The schools want 24 hours advance notice if it's a weekday, or and 3 hours if it's a weekend, or was it the other way around?
It was 3 hours if it's a weekday and 24 hours
Okay,
on a
right.
weekday.
But again, that's just feeding. That's sort of saying we're expecting
The what?
the worst. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, psychological.
Yeah, yeah. And my wife works in one of the main shopping centers, the Galleria, and there are all sorts of rumors that they have contingency plans. None have been announced that she knows of, but you know, everyone goes there and says, "Oh, you know, what are the plans?" And we hear the Galleria is going to be one of the primary targets and stuff. And again, it's just, to my knowledge, it's just rumor, but.
I guess what I would suggest for those of you that are in the room, as you are, I guess, interfacing with different groups of people, that everybody begin to see this as, and I hate to say it this way, but it kind of goes back to what the news media did, preparing for war. And I do think there has to be kind of like coming to a town. People are already prepared as to what to do, and in this situation, I think it's important for people to set their minds on, you know, what is it that they need to be prepared to do, because my wish, and I will say this and I interject this for you all to think about it. My hope is that fewer and fewer people will participate in protests, because I'm still trying to connect the dots between the protests and the justice that people are seeking. When I studied my father's movement, I don't see the same connecting of the dots. And there are two things that I just want to continue to suggest. One, that plans be made to have people gather in different locations where some of the grievances or expressions can take place that are not in the form of just protest in the street. Now, I know people have the right to protest, I'm not refuting that. But what I'm trying to do is there has to be an outsmarting of the folks who are preparing for the disaster not falling into their hands, as I said earlier, because they know how to deal with violence, and they're going to deal with it. They're prepared for that, and as Charles said, the repercussions in this situation is going to be worse than they could ever face at any other time, because when feds are involved, that elevates, you know, what happens to you. When you get a federal charge against you, it's much harder to shake than some state or local charge against you. And people have to start letting people, it's not about the dying. I mean, they can say, well, I'm not afraid to die. Well, they're smart enough, I believe, they're smart enough not to kill too many, but to really mess people's lives up. Some more, you know, pipeline, you know, some more folks, some more black people put in jail, more felon charges and all that kind of stuff, and just ruining your life more than killing you. I'm not saying that some lives will not be taken, but I think it's really ruining people's lives more so than the other. And if we can find churches, synagogue, whatever has to be found, where masses of people can gather, whatever kind of buildings, sometimes people have civic centers, I don't know, whatever, where there can be some form of whatever expression people need to have during that time period, instead of gathering in the streets. It's one thing. The second thing is everybody continues in this season to put a lot of pressure on government, police, and all that kind of stuff, and I'm not excusing them. But I really think during my father's time period, it was the season of really putting the pressure on government. And government still has a tremendous amount of responsibility, but we are allowing corporate America to get off the hook in a lot of regards because they really control the interests. A lot of these elected officials are controlled by business. I mean, every town in America, there are businesses and corporations there. And those corporations have a lot of influence with mayors of those towns. And a lot of times we're trying to, negotiate or whatever we're doing with some quote-unquote mayor or some police chief, when the real power is in the corporations pressuring the mayor, pressuring the police chief, pressuring the police officers. And we just need to start considering what role does corporate America play in all this, and how can we connect and begin the process of negotiating with them and putting some pressure there to bring the mail on all this other stuff, instead of just trying to put all the pressure on the government side. I think it's a both and. That's all I want to say. Because those businesses are like, look, we'll leave your town. You gotta get this straight.
Right.
I mean, just those 2 points again, as we close and wrap up. Mass meetings is what I heard Ms. King say, where people can express themselves in a gathering, get a strategy instead of in the streets protesting, and then looking at ways we can put pressure on corporate America and kind of balance that pressure people are putting on government with pressure on corporate entities that then influence government to make changes in communities. So those are 2 things to consider. We'll send those 2 things in a follow-up email as well, so we can keep looking at those. And again, thank you for your time tonight. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Charles. To all those present in this room, thank you for attending tonight. And we thank you again in St. Louis for your time with us this evening. We look forward to communicating with you soon. Have a good night and safe travels.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good night.